The soldiers had struggled and died in darkness. Yet, as dawn began to crack over San Antonio de Bear, it faintly illuminated the shattered fort. The soft light exposed sights of death and destruction that horrified even those who had just fought the battle. Those visions seared themselves into the memory of Mexican officer Jose Enrique de la Pena, who recalled the grisly spectacle.
The bodies, with their blackened and bloody faces, disfigured by a desperate death, their hair and uniforms burning at once, presented a dreadful and truly hellish sight. What trophies, those of the battlefield.
Mexican survivors of the carnage remained in a condition of uneasy tension and continued to shoot at shadows. When a terrified feline scurried among the ruins, a shaky and superstitious soldado shouted,
"It's not a cat, but an American."
In a berserk frenzy, his comrades cornered the helpless mouser and tore it to pieces with their bayonets. Those who sleep snugly in their beds should not be too eager to condemn this wanton bloodlust. The Mexican assault troops had witnessed their companions mangled by artillery, riddled by rifles, and gutted by bowie knives. Having survived the slaughter themselves, they were unwilling to take further chances. Generalissimo Antonio Lopez de Santana made a grand entrance into the compound. He had always been careless with the lives of his men, and now he surveyed the bloodbath with remarkable indifference. Before the attack, he had not even bothered to set up a field hospital. Ramon Martinez Caro, Santana's personal secretary, recorded that
more than 100 of the wounded died afterwards as a result of the lack of proper medical attention in medical facilities, in spite of the fact that their injuries were not serious. Those who lingered in pain and suffering without the proper comfort and relief envied their comrades who died instantly.
During the assault, the garrison's non-combatants had huddled in the sacristy of the church. As Mexican soldiers flooded into the room, they herded them into a protective corner. For more than 15 minutes, musket fire peppered the building and continued even after the last Texian rebel lay dead. Then came silence, which for the wives and offspring of the fort's defenders was even more ominous than the cacophony of battle. An impeccably uniformed English-speaking Mexican officer entered the sacristy. This was almost certainly Colonel Juan Almonte, who had received his education in the United States.
"Is Miss Dickinson here?"
And she was. Susanna Dickinson, the wife, now widow, of Artillery Captain Almiron Dickinson, crouched with the others, holding her infant daughter, Angelina. Traumatized by that morning's events and frightened out of her wits, Mrs. Dickinson hesitated to identify herself.
"Is Miss Dickinson here? If you value your life, speak up. It's a matter of life and death."
Only then did she step forward. As Almonte led mother and child out of the church and into the hazy fog of black powder smoke, one might have noticed that the sun was rising over the hills behind the fort. The battle was over, but a few nervous soldados continued to shoot off their muskets helter-skelter. As she walked across the courtyard in front of the church, one of those careless rounds caught Mrs. Dickinson in the calf of her right leg. Colonel Almonte determined that her wound, while painful, was not serious and hastened her along. The longer they remained inside the fort, the more likely it became that the young widow and her baby would receive more lethal injuries.
As we passed through the enclosed ground in front of the church, I saw heaps of dead and dying.
Amid the turmoil, one of those bodies demanded her special attention.
I recognized Colonel Crockett lying dead and mutilated between the church and the two-story barrack building, and even remember his peculiar cap lying by his side.
Almonte escorted mother and child into Bayer and took them to the home of their close friends, Ramon and Francisca Musquis. Santana ordered his soldiers to inter their slain messmates in Bayer's Campo Santo. And what of the rebel corpses? He would have them burned like so much garbage. Mexicans spent the rest of the day stripping the Texian bodies, tying ropes round their ankles and dragging them to twin funeral pyres. Pablo Diaz, a local Tejano, related how
grease of different kinds, principally tallow, was melted and poured over the two pyres.
By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the soldados had collected all the dead Texians and piled them in layers. Then they set all alight.
The dense smoke from this fire went up into the clouds, and I watched it while the fire burned for 2 days and 2 nights.
Even after all that time, the flames did not entirely consume the cadavers. He reported seeing
charred skulls, fragments of arms, hands, feet, and other members of the bodies of the dead defenders.
The stench, he avowed, was almost unbearable. Earlier, Captain Fernando Uriza approached Santana in the bloody compound. The callousness of the general astounded him. Referring to the corpses, His Excellency casually remarked,
"These are the chickens. Much blood has been shed, but the battle is over. It was but a small affair."
In strictly military terms, Santana was correct. Compared to the Napoleonic and Mexican Revolutionary battles that preceded it, the assault on the tiny border outpost was little more than a skirmish. The Duke of Wellington, for example, had suffered more casualties at the Battle of Talavera than the total number of combatants in this diminutive engagement. So, judging simply by the statistics, it was a small affair. Yet numbers alone can never convey the real meaning of the Battle of the Alamo. It quickly transcended mere history, entering the realm of myth. The fall of the fort provided a potent rallying symbol, filling Texians with a righteous anger, an anger that would bear fruit on the boggy field of San Jacinto. Today, the Alamo is the most celebrated military engagement in Texas history. Each year, more than 3 million tourists visit the battle site and pay homage to the valor and determination of the defenders. But what were the circumstances that led to the battle, and what were the consequences of it? It will require an entire course, my friends, to answer that question.